Welcome, everyone. I am the non-basketball player in the crowd here, just in case you can't tell.
I don't play either.
And I don't play anymore either myself.
Okay, we're all in the same boat here. So welcome, everyone. This is going to be a great panel. We are going to discuss basketball, its role in cities, its role in activism, and the commissioner on the end here has the honor of being the commissioner of the wokest professional sports league in all of America. Did you know that? Is that something that you've set out to do, to be a woke commissioner?
No, it's honestly, it's not a term I would have used, and I didn't know that we were given that designation, possibly by the wokest newspaper, I guess.
Thank you.
But I will say, I think I understand the sentiment, and we're proud of that. I know both Grant and I, feel strongly that we have a platform that we're providing to players, coaches, former players and owners in certain cases, which Grant is now, to speak out on issues that are important to them. And, as one thing people may not realize, 25% of the players in our league now are born outside the United States. So, in fact, to us, it's a core part of Americana that we're even exporting, that sense of these uniquely American values in terms of free speech, the feeling protected in the workplace, that you can talk about issues that are important to you. So if it gets translated into being woke, that's fine with me. But it is important to us.
So you've said that players aren't just our players aren't just ball players; they're also citizens. There are limits, though, right, in what someone can say, what someone can.
They just can't criticize the officials. President, whatever. Just don't touch the referees. No, but there are. I mean,
yeah.
we have those discussions with our players. I mean, in terms of being respectful, in terms of talking about, frankly, the officiating of the games. I mean, they recognize there are certain parameters. Political speech is their absolute right within the league, but we don't hide from the fact that we are a business, that we have a partnership with the players. But those rules of the road are agreed upon. They have a strong players association. It's a union. There's a collective bargaining agreement that sets out, in essence, those limitations. And they apply to whether they're talking to the media or they're on social media, but those get worked out. I mean, and a lot of it's the sort of heat in the moment comments that go to the integrity of what happens on the court. It's less about, and I can't even think of a situation where it's a societal issue, but incidentally, I mean, it also goes to hate speech. I mean, very famously, there was an owner who crossed that line since I've been commissioner. So there's a particular set of values that have been part of this league for the 70-plus years it's been in existence, and it's my job to enforce those values.
So, Grant, you played for the Magic for 7 years. You're still, I think you still live in Florida. You clearly care a lot about the state. You weighed in on the governor's race recently. Your candidate, despite an extremely close race, did not win. What prompted you to get involved in that? What was your calculation? Why were you, a basketball guy, a businessman, weighing in on the governor's race of Florida?
Well, I live in Florida. I'm a taxpayer. And so, there are issues near and dear to me and to those that I know and what's best for, what I believe what's best for the state of Florida. But look, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and obviously was around the political environment and have participated in a number of different, elections and fundraising, getting out, on the circuit there, if you will, and speaking, as an advocate for various politicians. So, just because you're an athlete, doesn't mean that you're not engaged or involved or not care. I mean, I do, and I think that there's a lot of issues that are important in the state of Florida. And Andrew Gillum, who I supported, I had a chance to meet him during his primaries, the primary elections, and I was impressed. I love his platform. I love his stance on a number of different issues, and I wanted to support him. So I wrote a check. I got out, gave some speeches on behalf of him, And I understand that, I think my platform, my visibility certainly, I would hope would help in terms of relaying and conveying his message. And so I'm comfortable, I'm comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable, and I think it's my right as a taxpayer, as a citizen to do that.
The other thing that citizens can do when they feel moved by politics is actually run for office. And there are a number of people who have said that you should do that, and that one thing about this conference that you don't know is that unless news is broken on the stage, the moderator doesn't get their supper. So can you why don't you just sort of tell us whether or not you're going to be a politician one day, like just jump into politics? You could announce the specific race or just kind of keep it in the open. It will just be between us.
So don't worry. I know a lot of great restaurants here in New Orleans. We can go and make sure that we can have a great meal this evening. But I will say this. I've always been intrigued by the idea of being a politician. And if I ever decide to choose courage over comfort, I'll let you know.
Good. We will exchange it.
I think he's running.
You heard it.
Write the headline.
You heard it here. So you also got involved in Amendment 4, an issue down in Florida, and it's a really important issue, and it's whether people with felony records should be able to vote after they serve their time. Give us your view. Why did you favor this? This one passed in Florida. What was it about that issue?
No, not all felony.
Not all felonies.
Not all felonies, but
yeah.
Yes. And actually, coincidentally, the person who really brought it to my attention was part of the N.B.A. family, Stan Van Gundy, who coached in Orlando, coached for a period of time with Detroit, and is a resident of Central Florida. But, I do feel that there are people who are denied that opportunity who have paid their debt to society.
Yep.
And so, we should not limit them and not let them be a part of the American political scene. And they have a voice. They made a mistake, and I feel they have the right. They paid, like I said, they paid their debt, and so it was something that made sense. It was something that I felt also affected the African American community, because a majority of these individuals were African American who fit into that box. And so, I was very outspoken about it. I got the word out. I'm not saying I'm the reason it passed, but I feel like it had a tremendous amount of momentum in our state, and thankfully it did pass.
It passed. Commissioner, you have been an activist as the head of the league. You moved the All-Star game out of North Carolina after the anti-gay legislation was passed there. What was that about? And did you get any blowback from anybody who thought that this sport should not be involved in a political issue, and how did you deal with that?
So we got lots of blowback, frankly, from all kinds of people who felt that we should stay in our lane, so to speak, and stay out of a North Carolina political issue as described by some. And I'll just go back to my earlier answer, and for us it was a violation of the core values that this league stands for. And what I've pointed out to people, not values that were created during my tenure as commissioner, or frankly during David Stern's, but go back to the early days of this league, go back to Bill Russell and Bob Cousy and Wayne Embry and other great legends around this game. And it was our feeling, and Michael Jordan, coincidentally or not, is obviously one of the greatest ever, is the team owner in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he took a significant economic hit by virtue of this decision, but he was very supportive of it. And I think the decision became clear for us as a league, despite the fact that we knew we would get a certain amount of blowback, and we did. But I'd also say we were in good company. There were several other national businesses and partners of the N.B.A.'s, companies like Nike, like Pepsi, who indicated to us that they were uncomfortable with the fact that our All-Star game, which is a celebration in essence of the game, was going to take place in a state that had legislation that was viewed as discriminating against part of our citizenship, and so we made that decision, and frankly, through a coalition, then worked in a way, same way that Grant had, in a very affirmative way towards replacing that law. And I'd say we were also criticized for the compromise we were part of then by the other side of the political spectrum that felt that we, by virtue of the fact that we were willing to compromise the issue, which I also think is a value unto itself. But we found, I think, a path to a place that we felt was consistent with who we are as a league. And I'll just say, and now we then rescheduled that All-Star game for Charlotte, North Carolina, is taking place in February of next year.
That's great. And you mentioned Bill Russell, and he famously went to the Lincoln Memorial for the MLK I Have a Dream speech. He's brought that up to you, right? That's something you've heard him talk about, and he got some consequences because of that.
Well,
right?
It came up. We were in Los Angeles last year for our All-Star game, and it was that weekend when a commentator on Fox News had said about LeBron in response to his criticism of something that President Trump had said, that commentator said he should, quote, shut up and dribble. And Bill Russell happened to be there in Los Angeles, and he pointed out that he had been the MVP of the All-Star game in 1963. His Celtics had then gone on to win the championship that spring, and that very summer was that Martin Luther King Jr. speech that you're referring to. And his point was, in defense of LeBron and the league, that, participation in our society has been something, again, as I said earlier, has been part of this league since the early days. And so this wasn't a new phenomenon where LeBron, in the same class as Bill Russell, important player in the league, was speaking out on issues that were important to him as a citizen. And what I thought was so remarkable there is that there's usually a tradition where the commissioner of the league, along with the head of the Players Association, a woman named Michelle Roberts, speak just to the All-Stars before the game. And we had pointed out to them that Bill Russell, in fact, was going to be in attendance at the game. And every player, when they went out for their warm-ups, made a point of going over to Mr. Russell, who was sitting courtside, just to say thank you, and with that recognition of what he had done back in the early 60s to enable them to be in the position they are today. And just the last part of your question, he got enormous blowback back then. I mean, it's the well-known incidents, don't need to talk about it, but, destruction of his home,
wow.
Character assassination, for what is now viewed, I'd say, also as something that truly value-based and people, but at the time was viewed as a very controversial political act on his part to stand there with Dr. King.
So we all know there's been a lot of controversy on football fields and kneeling. And let me ask you, Grant, your father was a NFL player. I imagine if that had been your life's goal, could have become an NFL player, I have no doubt. Let's stipulate for this question. If you were playing for the NFL right now, would you be joining in the kneeling protests or not? And if Colin Kaepernick had gone the basketball route, would he be playing for the N.B.A. right now?
I'm not sure I could answer that first question. I think I will say in terms of I believe if there was a Colin Kaepernick in the N.B.A., he'd be playing.
He'd be playing.
And I just think that, I know that as a steward of the Atlanta Hawks franchise, and I've talked to our managing partner about this plenty of times, Tony Ressler, we would be supportive of any of our athletes and their willingness to engage, to speak out on various issues. Obviously there are rules in place, and I don't think you want to kneel on a hardwood floor, and that's not really part of the culture of the N.B.A., where that might be more part of the tradition, kneeling, taking a knee in football. But, we want to be supportive of our players, and I think we have, and I can't speak on other leagues because I'm not in those leagues, and I'm only 100% N.B.A., so I don't really follow other sports. But I do think our leadership has been very supportive of our players, and there's definitely a healthy relationship, a back and forth, and so I think Adam takes the time to listen and understand the issues and where players are concerned and where they're coming from. So. I don't think, I'm not being, this is not to take a shot at another league, but I just think that if someone who had those type of views was in our league, and we have guys who are outspoken, they may just channel it in a different way, but definitely are very much about presenting and projecting what they believe to the public.
There's a long tradition of champions in the different leagues going to the White House. Doesn't matter if the president is Democrat or Republican, long tradition. Something's going on recently, and teams have not been going. There was a tweet from the real Donald Trump Twitter account, invitation is withdrawn, back in 2017 when Curry said he didn't want to go, and then the invitation was withdrawn. Commissioner, how do you view that? Are we somehow letting politics and sports collide here? Is this good for the country? How do you view it?
Well, I mean, I don't buy into the premise of the collision of politics and sports as if they have historically been separate, because that was my earlier point. I think they've always been part and parcel of our society, and at the time, before President Trump had put out that tweet disinviting the team, I was in favor of the team going, several things have happened since then, and so maybe would have a different view now, but at least at the time I thought that it was an opportunity. If the president was willing to afford those players that opportunity, for it to be more than a photo op. And my view, and I think Coach Kerr shared that view at the time, that to the extent that the President of the United States was willing to sit down with a group of N.B.A. players and hear them out on issues that were important to them, it was potentially a lost opportunity not to go. And what happened in that particular situation, what Steph Curry had said was, I don't want to go, but we're meeting as a team and are going to make a decision. Before they met as a team, President Trump preempted that meeting and disinvited them. So maybe in retrospect, it wouldn't have made sense, but at least to me, that participation in democracy is critically important, and it's a unique opportunity, it's a privileged opportunity potentially to have that opportunity. And so I accept where we are, but I also think it's incredibly unfortunate, because while I wouldn't separate politics and sports, sports has historically been a platform to bring people together. I mean, even think about in a stadium or an arena, generally you're bringing together a cross-section of people from that community for a common purpose. It doesn't mean that they don't have political disagreements. It doesn't mean that they should park them and even not, and potentially not talk about them to the person sitting next to them. But I still think, it's also important to point out the commonality among people and not just those differences.
Let's talk about arenas and the role they play in cities. That's the theme of this conference, cities. So the Atlanta Hawks arena just underwent this dramatic renovation. I read it. It's second most expensive in N.B.A. history, just behind Madison Square Garden. So I hear it's downright fancy. One day I will check it out for myself. Was it a good deal for the city? Clearly those who can afford the tickets to the game are now going to have a better time. But how does it help the city of Atlanta?
First of all, you have an open invitation.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting, and obviously we're here at this conference, Cities for Tomorrow, but we are in a experience economy. And, I think these arenas really are kind of the anchor stores for these experiences. And, the thing is they create memories. And I think all businesses are trying to get people out of the house, off their phones, and in their doors. And trying to, okay, what can we do that's, because you're not going to compete against maybe the Amazons of the world that are fast, that are easy, that are quick. But what can we do? What's the commonality? What's the thing that is universal? To me, it's sport, it's music, and it's food. And you can go all over the world, which I've done and been fortunate to do, being in the N.B.A. and done some trips with Commissioner Silver and with various teams I've been on. And you can talk to people and connect with people on sport, music, and food. Mm-hmm. And so those are sort of the themes that we feel these arenas can provide. And that's what we've tried to do in Atlanta. We talk about a slogan being true to Atlanta. Well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Well, Atlanta's diverse. It's multicultural. It's a unique market. And so within our arena, we have Zach Brown's Social Club, which Zach Brown's a famous country music artist who's also an entrepreneur and has a number of restaurants. We have a swag shop, which is a barber shop. And as part of the African-American culture and experience, and a lot that happens in a barber. You can sit in a barber's chair and watch the game, which is like heaven for me. But those are just...
I wouldn't know.
But I mean, I think we've tried to capture that spirit, and it's something we're extremely proud of. But yeah, I mean, that's the role. I mean, I think in addition to what Commissioner Silver said, sports can galvanize a community. And when I go to a game now and I see the diversity, and look, make no mistake, we're not good right now. I mean, we don't have a great record. But to see people coming and supporting and cheering and interacting and mingling, and that experience, that's something that I think that's the role we can play. One of the many roles we can play, particularly in these city courts.
We're going to take questions, so if anybody has any questions. And Commissioner, just quickly, let me talk a little bit about Milwaukee's arena. I've heard you sort of talk about Republican governor, city
Democratic
of Milwaukee.
mayor, Democratic city council.
Yeah,
no, just to add to Grant's answer, these are modern-day town halls. And if you see in the 70s, there was a trend of N.B.A. teams moving out of cities into suburbs, and I think Detroit was one of the last to come back. Mayor Duggan, who was on an earlier panel with somebody I dealt with extensively, where he recognized that in terms of both the economic impact and also, frankly, the symbolism for the revitalization of downtown Detroit, it was critical to bring that team back. And what we're seeing now in terms of arenas as economic engines, in addition to what Grant talked about, the experience they're creating sort of within the four walls of the arena. In addition, where the economic impact truly comes is from the developments around these arenas. And so there's this concept that was piloted in LA, what they call LA Live, around the Staples Center. So first they took a downtown area that was suffering, frankly, economically. They made the investment in the arena there, but then sprouting up around the arena were restaurants, theaters, clubs that created 365 days a year activity where it's a vibrant community every night. And remember, with arenas, and stadiums are a little different economics, but with arenas where we're just a small part of the dates. So maybe an N.B.A. team is 50 dates out of maybe 300 dates for well-used arenas. And so it's not just the experience of the concert, the show, the game, the hockey game, or whatever is going on in that arena, but then the crowd walks out and then has hours to experience the environment around that arena.
Great. Let's hear from some of you. We have a question right here in the third row.
So sports and art, I think, has always sat at a place. Artists and athletes have always had a freedom of expression. I think that other industries haven't had. So I was just curious. We have athletes such as yourself or Amari Stoudemire who have developed, large art collections, and just curious about how you think artists and athletes can work together more effectively, just to impact communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, that's something that's near and dear to me, and I've been a collector for my entire adult life. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a way to support a community. I think the artistic expression is important. And I think a lot of the contemporary artists, and particularly the genre that I collect, are activists in their own right, you know, and so they are speaking on issues. They're, you know, or creating what's happening and sort of reflecting or almost a snapshot of what's happening in today's society. And so, you know, the great thing about our league and the players in the league is we have a diverse mix of interest, and guys are very much engaged and involved in a number of different things. But you're starting to see more of that. I also think the influence of culture and music and hip hop. I mean, I think all of that is sort of part of that sort of that confluence of different, you know, music, sports, art, the artistry that's there is contributing to making a difference and having an impact. And so that will only continue, I think, you know, as we move forward.
That's great. And another question over here.
We started off talking today about opportunity gap, and one of the biggest areas of inequity is in youth sports. And I just wondered if either one of you had any comments on, well, not all youth are going to become professional players. It's a tremendous opportunity of enrichment, and youth sports has become a $17 billion industry and very much a pay-to-play model. So participation for higher income families is increasing and participation for lower income families is decreasing. And just wondered if you could talk about, as citizens, any programs or investments you might be making to level that playing field.
Yeah, sure. I'll start, you know, in response, frankly, to that trend and that data. We've made a huge investment in the last few years in our N.B.A, our junior N.B.A programs, also programs that we call N.B.A Fit. And we think especially perfect opportunity here at a conference devoted to cities where, especially where we want our kids to be active, boys and girls, where often there's not a lot of space, there's not a lot of outdoor fields, or the climate doesn't lend itself to outdoor sports, that we think basketball is an incredible platform, putting aside elite development, but for kids to engage and learn values like hard work and leadership and followership and what the value is of working, you know, together as a team. And so it's something I know it's near and dear to Grant as well, because he personally is on the court often leading those clinics. But we do it extensively throughout the United States. We've put together programs for our teams to engage directly in the communities, and we see it as a real opportunity. I think especially, again, one, of course, to support the game of basketball, but also where you see increasing, especially among lower socioeconomic groups, increases in childhood obesity, diabetes, that getting kids active and doing it with a sport, you know, where it's incredibly difficult to be Grant Hill, but it's fairly simple to understand the game and be able to participate. So we're very
Grant,
focused on
you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think as it relates to in Atlanta, let's say, we have a program called Building Bridges Through Basketball. And we've gone and we're renovating 25 courts in impoverished communities and neighborhoods throughout the greater Atlanta metropolitan. And it's a partnership with the mayor's office, and it's been hugely impactful. I mean, not only are we building courts, but we're creating programs, activations. We're out there visibly as an organization, as players, you know, helping to mentor young coaches, so teaching them the skills necessary to be able to share that with young kids. Also having interaction between teenagers and the police department, particularly in a lot of these African-American communities. And so the feedback has been hugely popular. We're so proud of that program. Crime has gone down, and just giving kids an opportunity to play in a safe space, but also, most importantly, as Adam said, Commissioner Silver said, you know, just to learn the values that sports teaches you. Like, that's the most important thing. And as a parent who has children who play, and I don't have any expectation that they're going to go on and have great success past high school, but as a father and as someone who's gone through it, if they can learn about collective responsibility and handling failure, handling success, you know, discipline, all those values, that's transferable. And that's something I think you can take with you and apply in all areas of life. So to be able to do that through basketball, through the N.B.A, through the Atlanta Hawks, that's something that's, I don't know, just I'm very proud to be able to do that.
Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Hill, thank you very much. Our time has ended, but can we thank them for their great insights?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.